A little adjustment. Testing. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Man, I feel like this morning really is just coming together, flowing together, a confluence of energies. There has been so much with Patsy, with the prayer chaplains, with all the moving and shaking that we continue to do as we pull ourselves into focus. It's an unpublished Charles Fillmore quote somewhere that I didn't write down, but he was likening the I am, that the awareness, to be a lens for that light that comes through. That's what our awareness, our consciousness, this thing we have some amount of control over in terms of how we choose to shape our thoughts, as being a lens to focus light through. And that feels present to me today. I myself have been doing some outside extracurricular non-unity prayer training, of course, from one of my teachers. And in part of that prayer course, he quoted another work, a man who had been traveling in the Himalayas and was visiting monasteries and doing sort of an investigative journalism kind of a book, specifically about prayer and about practice. And so as he was talking to the leader of this monastery community, discussing, what his perceptions were, his observations of how the monks carried on their day-to-day life and practiced being, fully dedicated to the spiritual life in a way that most of us living here on the ground day to day, we may sometimes fantasize that might be nice, but these people do it, right? This is a day in, day out job for them. And the leader of this monastery sort of corrected or called up this investigative journalist, this Westerner, pointing out, you've never seen our prayers. Prayers happen inside of the one praying. What you see is, outside, what the form is, what the external body shape and noises are. Sure, that's not the prayer. The prayer is the feeling. And so I just couldn't lose that thought as I thought about what it is that I wanted to follow up on Patsy's series with. Prayer is the feeling. And my title all picked out. And as I'm shuffling those letters in the office, getting ready to change our marquee board so that could be the affirmation for the week to everyone visiting the building, driving past on West Seneca Turnpike, sharing on social media, that would be, this is my watchword, my phrase, my affirmation. And what came to my mind as I looked in the mirror and shuffled letters was, I'm not feeling it. And I noticed what I said. I thought, well, maybe I should look more at that because, my unity training enough to say any phrase that starts with I am is something a bit more powerful that bears a second look. Knew I was saying something important. And if you don't want to take my word for it, you can check Exodus 3:14, where Moses is having the burning bush reveal to him, boy, what name should I say I'm being sent? It's I am that I am. That is the name of the highest principle and concept. Super big, right? Big brain time. And yet, that is the name which each person can only say of themselves. Each one of us, when we say that name, it's a very special word and a special name. And it is itself an affirmation. And if you check your own experience, you don't need to go to any books. Enough of us can check in with one another, with our own path through life, to know that there is power in that particular name and in any phrase that we use, I am. There's something to it. It's the kernel of what we speak of as affirmative prayer. We're not necessarily speaking to something outside, but we do recognize that everything that appears to be outside is also related to us inside. We can get trapped in that feeling that everything's in our heads, but maybe our heads are bigger than we realize that it is. But there are connections. And so as I'm realizing that I'm not feeling it, is the thing that's coming out of my lips, and it's in my head and on my heart, I have to do something other than just put that out in the world. I had to make that my title, then I would have to make it a prayer, and all I had to do was address it as if I'm speaking to this concept. I'm not feeling it, God. I'm not feeling it, God. And transforming a piece of pain, or at least an awareness that there's something lacking, into a conversation, a dialogue, an exchange, getting something that was stuck, realizing it, and then allowing it to move, putting it into a point of balance where it can shift and change. To me, that's the essence of prayer. We can all go home. What it made me think about and realize is that that piece of acceptance is really important, to recognize that I am who I am. I am what I am. I'm willing and able for that to be changed or transformed, but that's where I'm at today. And that's what the first step is. And what my words are saying, I don't need to get hung up on, I've always got to phrase things right. Like, I've got some tools about language that comes from practicing unity principles, going to classes, having conversations, hanging out here, right? There's a certain way of thinking and speaking that we cultivate. That's our toolkit that we keep on sharpening and refining. I think that's why we get together and keep on showing up for this and keep on reading these old books and older books. But what our words are doing, we don't need to get too hung up on it, because feeling is the prayer. The words are a vehicle. Our thinking is just a way of reflecting on the rest of what's happening for us. It's only one piece. We think, but we also feel, and we also will or do things in the world. I think that's a nice 3-part breakdown of how this works. And my prayer right then was a help kind of feeling, right? So I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm not where I want to be. There's an aspect of my experience today that is suffering, that is not as I would like it to be. And I'm willing for it to be different. I'm not feeling it, God. I'm not just affirming a negative thing. I am using it as a way to open myself. And too often, because this is easy to do, because of our culture, because of where we come from, because thinking is safe and feeling can be vulnerable, we do a lot of talky talk focus. A lot of that speaking self gets to be in first place. The ego mind, the mortal part of the I am experience that seems to come from inside your head. And what I meant in that moment was an acknowledgement of my situation, that I wasn't feeling eager about what I was about to do, that I wasn't feeling zealous and alive to it. I wasn't running for it without hesitation. My heart wasn't in it. And so when I turn it over to God, to whatever that concept is for me, that working at that moment, is that there's something bigger or elsewise, something outside of this narrow place I find myself in, that I can open a window, that I can say, I can't do it all myself. This talking guy's out of work, out of trouble, out of energy to deal with this. I need something more. I can hand it over. I can move from a thinking to an awareness of a feeling, and then switch back into a willing, a doing, to turn it over, to say something, to do prayer. There's always an option for us to do that, no matter how big or small it is that we're working on. It was taught to me a long time ago in another spiritual teaching that, it's easier, you're better able to act yourself into right thinking than you are to think yourself into right acting. You're better able to act yourself into right thinking than you are to think yourself into right acting. So, so often it gets troubling to think, if I'm not where I want to be, and I know a bunch of stuff about new thought and about, mind causation or positive psychology, whatever. that I'm not doing it hard enough. I'm not praying enough. I'm not praying the right way. I'm having the wrong thoughts in mind, and that's why my reality is manifesting the way it is. And we go down some real toxic, dangerous places that discredit New Thought as being a way of looking at the world that deserves consideration, like some real stupid New Age stuff. Dangerous, unpleasant, and toxic thoughts can come out of that. Victim blaming stuff, right? So how do we hold radical, spiritual, creative, co-creative responsibility and not do that? And part of it is to realize it's not all just talking self, that the feeling and the doing is the other 2/3, at least, of our experience. The thinking's job is just to become aware of it so that we can do something like a little thinking maneuver, changing the way we phrase something, noticing the way that we're speaking to ourselves, since that is so much of our days. But it's also things like, I don't know what to do, so I've been spending a lot of time picking up litter in the park, which gets me out of the house, moving my body into a place that's slightly more peaceful and tranquil, that's full of more beings than just the narrow confines of whatever decoration on my post-it notes with affirmations and decorations, whatever. That stuff in the house, that's all me. It's all my ego output. I go out into the world where the trees are whispering, the wind is blowing in my face, I'm getting rained on, and no matter what else I can say or do, I know that there's not as many rappers on the playground, and I can go home and have a little bit of tiredness in my body because I did something and moved. And that is more beneficial to me in so many times, is to try and think the right thoughts or read another book or even talk to other people sometimes, to be alone in the company of the world, doing and acting and changing something outside of me. So I'm not feeling it, God. What am I feeling? To use that gift of awareness, I'm feeling joyful and aligned with my purpose, like I am when I'm picking up litter. I am when I'm discovering things that bring me pleasure in my body, pleasure in my day-to-day, when I'm on that quest and not putting on the sideline because I have too many things to do, but making sure I have a space for joy, pleasure, rest, things that make me feel good, that refresh me, doing things that feel good. I don't think about how important that is all the time. But when I'm doing that more, I'm rewarded with it. I'm rewarded with, that's why gratitude lists work, is because it shifts you into doing something that changes the way you're thinking, that allows you to feel, allows you access to different parts of your experience. If I'm feeling joy, then, no problem. I'm having a great time. I'm afraid, or I'm angry or sad, if that's what I find when I look at myself, what then? If I'm numb, what then? The nice thing about pain is that it can sharpen your awareness. It can sharpen my awareness, certainly. Some of my hard times are the things that push me to change, to allow, to welcome something different. I'm ready to give up on something that's not working. And I'm open enough to accept something new. So a lot of times those tragedies and hard moments are the biggest gift I can get. And if I'm thinking that way, it works better. I'm looking for them more. They don't hurt as much, or at least I'm not suffering through them as much, which is maybe my main project here. I don't want to have a bad time. I don't want to give up on sensation. I want to be able to feel the whole world. I want to be able to feel more. And I don't know that you can get that pleasure without also accepting the pain, but I do know that the suffering can be optional, and that the prayer portion of being able to turn it over just by simply adding that consciousness to what's already going on. I'm not feeling it. God, that's the point where something can change direction and go in a different way. Because what is feeling but energy in motion? And sometimes it gets stuck, especially if there's been something extremely difficult. Traumas, big or small, can freeze parts of ourselves. And those emotions are stuck, and then they'll come out again. And that can be real confusing, because why should this thing from long ago suddenly be present? Or am I even aware of it? Or do I just know that it really threatens me when something gets moved in the kitchen and the person that I supposedly love the most is now a target of fear and hate or resistance or whatever? Like, these moments happen very quickly because there's something more than just thoughts. They're in the body. They're in our actions and our feelings, not necessarily something we're aware of in our minds. But if we're praying ceaselessly, I think that's it. Prayer is the feeling. So unexamined, frozen feelings are still working to manifest our world. That's the conclusion I have to draw from thinking this all through, is that part of the reason our lives are the way they are is because we want them. We are constantly reshaping them to be this way. And some of that may have a certain amount to do with unexamined, untransformed, unhealed parts of ourselves, parts that we don't want to bring awareness to, parts that we repress and disown and deny and keep in the dark because we don't think we can handle them or don't think they deserve to be healed. We cover them over. That's what shame means, it's to cover over. And if we're spending energy on that, if we're spending energy on lying to ourselves and to the people around us, how much of our world-creating spiritual power gets bound up in just that background process of papering over, making this false world with our words, our feelings, because we're too scared to touch that thing in the dark. I think that what I need out of religion is that kind of container that lets me do that helps me to come back to those feelings, to feel them, so that I can heal them. Because if I'm suffering, something can be different. And our remedy for that, our recommended solution, the prescription from Unity, is prayer. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You can take on whatever shape you want, as long as it's something. That's a guarantee. Guarantee the results. If you think you won't see any improvement in your conditions, we guarantee that you're probably right. But if you think it's possible, you're going to be more likely to find it. So I'm going to leave you with some silent time. Because whatever it is that you're feeling, it's possible to heal it. Without feeling, there is no healing. And Emma Curtis Hopkins, one of our New Thought Unity pioneers, had this to say as we cultivate curiosity and willingness to look at ourselves, the courage and the compassion to examine ourselves and to let feelings come up without judgment, and then to hand them over to a power beyond ourselves that can help us deal with them. She wasn't meek and demure. She wasn't spiritually bypassing. That's too much of what we do, isn't it? Part of that lying and avoiding. But of facing head on because we know we can handle it and we know we have tools to hack it. Hopkins said, "This too is good. This too is God. This too is for me. And I demand to see the blessing." Whoa, that's what I want. That's new thought. So let's repeat that after me. This too is good.
This too is good.
This too is good.
This too is good.
This too is God.
This too is God.
This too is for me.
This too is for me.
And I demand to see the blessing.
And I demand to see the blessing.
Accept and be looking for the blessing, friends. Just hold that space in silence on a Sunday morning together for a little while, and I'll bring us back. Does that feel like a long 90 seconds? I don't want to keep you here forever, because you can do this at home if you want to. This too is good. This too is God. This too is for me. And I demand to see the blessing. See you next week.